2017 CF 15684, State v. Nelson, back from our recess. Mr. Nunnally, is the state ready to proceed?
State's ready.
Ms. Simmons, defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Nelson, are you ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, bring the jury, please. Mr. Nunnally, does the state acknowledge the jury?
We do, Your Honor.
Ms. Simmons, defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, members of the jury, you're about to hear evidence about the impact of this murder on the community of Jennifer Fulford. This evidence is being presented to show the victim's uniqueness as an individual and the resultant loss by Jennifer Fulford's death. However, you may not consider this evidence as an aggravating factor. Mr. Nunnally, please call the next witness for the state.
State calls Adelle Wilczynski.
Thank you.
Please solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Please state and spell your first and last name for Madam Court Reporter.
Adelle, Adelle Wilczynski, Wilczynski.
Thank you. Mr. Nunnally.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Let me ask you to scoot a little bit toward the edge of your chair and a little closer to the microphone. The chair doesn't move.
Sorry.
Did you know Jennifer Lynn Fulford?
Yes.
And how long had you known Jennifer Lynn Fulford?
Probably 13 or 14 years.
Ma'am, you're really soft-spoken. Let me get you to move that
Maybe-
microphone closer to your mouth maybe a little bit.
Maybe 13 or 14 years?
Have you prepared a statement for the
Yes.
jury?
Yes.
Could I ask you to read that statement now, please, ma'am?
Yes. I don't really know where to start with this, nor did I realize how hard it was going to be for me to write this. I was asked to write an impact statement. I'm not sure if that means how my life was impacted by this wonderful person when she was alive or how I was impacted by her death. Because of my uncertainty, I'm going to write about both. I met Jen when I lived in Dallas. We lived in an apartment building called the Hamptons, which was nothing like the Hamptons. And my apartment shared a balcony with her and her now husband, Robert. We both spent a lot of time outside, so we got to know each other very well and became very close. Jen was 20 years older than me, but that never mattered. I remember the first time she met my mother, Jen said, "I don't know if I'm like Adelle's aunt or mom or best friend." She was my very best friend, my confidant, my partner in crime, my workout partner, my favorite companion, one of the most important people to me. She was my favorite person to be around, and I know I was one of hers as well. Our lives took us in different directions over the years. She moved to Florida to live closer to family, and I moved out of state as well, but we always kept in touch. Even though we were a far distance apart, we talked often, and I visited Florida often. We were both very excited the day I told her I was moving to Florida with my husband and son because we'd be close once again. Once we moved here, we didn't see each other as much as I wish we would have. Life was too busy, and she did not live especially close, and I did not realize how short of a time I had left with her. The best way for me to describe Jen is exceptionally special. She was kind and loving to every single person that she met. She knew everyone's name, and she actually cared to get to know every person she came across. She made it a point to say something uplifting to every single person that she encountered just to make them feel special. She was selfless. She vowed to think positive, and she shined with positive energy. She loved to sing and dance. She was the epitome of fun. She had the personality that stood out in a crowd. I feel very grateful and lucky that she chose me as her best friend. I wish I would have told her that when she was alive. In the week leading up to Jen's murder, we vowed to spend more time together because we had not seen each other as much as we would have liked. We together made plans for Robert's birthday. I thought it was strange when Jen did not pick up that phone that Wednesday when I called her to tell her that I found a cheap 2-bedroom hotel room with a shuttle to Halloween Horror Nights. We also planned on my husband and I sleeping over with the children. Jen was going to start watching the kids for us so my husband and I could have some alone time, and because she loved the children. Her alias was and still is Jenny Poppins, and to my kids, Aunt Jenny. Thursday, I woke up for work, looked at my phone, saw a message from Robert, and also got a message from Jen's daughter, Hannah, asking if Jen was with me. Knowing Jen and seeing these messages, I had the most horrible feeling I've ever felt. Jen was not one to go missing. I had an emptiness in my stomach filled with anxiety. I called Robert on my way to work at 6 o'clock, and he told me she was missing. I knew Jen was flying out to see her granddaughter to be born this day, and it was unlike her. More than unlike her, it would never happen. Everyone has a different experience about the day we found out about her death. Mine was in the bathroom at work. I got a call from Robert, and I knew something happened when I saw the phone number, which is why I walked into the bathroom. I didn't cry at first. I didn't know what to say. Maybe I knew before I even got the call. I was in denial. I realized now I was in shock. I shortly afterwards started hysterically crying. Unfortunately, there's no bereavement period for best friends. I continued to work as a walking zombie. Thank God for my coworkers, one in particular. After I found out, my weeks were filled with anger and depression. I didn't even realize how depressed I was until I wasn't depressed anymore. At the time, I thought it was normal to sleep half the day. My later days were filled with anger and questions. Why did this happen to her? I called her cell phone many times just to hear her voice on her voicemail. I wanted to call her today because as my best friend and confidant, I would have called her to talk about writing this and how heartbreaking it is. Jen's murder robbed the world of a best friend, wife, mother, grandmother, and the best nanny in the world. There's nothing I could do to bring her back, but I hope my words can paint the picture of how much Jen was loved and the wonderful impact she left on the world and the hearts of those who knew her.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ms. Simmons? You can step down.
This witness may be released, Your Honor.
All right, you're released, ma'am. Mr. Donnelly, please call the next witness, or next witness to the stage. Thank you.
Swear to testimony here about the give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Please state and spell your first and last name for Madam Court Report.
Joshua Stephany, Joshua Stephany.
Thank you. Mr. Donnelly.
You are the Chief Medical Examiner for Orange County, are you not?
Yes,
You have previously testified in this case.
yes,
In your prior testimony, you identified a stab wound to Mrs. Fulford's heart. Where was that stab wound?
it was to the left ventricle of the heart, so it's to the left side of the heart.
You were asked a question by the defense about whether or not the stab wound to Mrs. Fulford's heart caused, and I quote, instantaneous death. Do you recall that?
Yes,
I believe there was a reference in that question to interruption of the electrical activity of the heart. Do you recall that also?
yes.
Does a stab wound to the left ventricle of the heart cause interruption of the heart's electrical activity?
Typically not. The conduction of the heart, or the electrical impulses of the heart, go down the center of the heart. The middle wall was called the interventricular septum. And so that's where the main electrical impulses go that cause conduction and pumping of the heart. And then they go down to the bottom of the heart and then kind of go back up the sides.
Is there anything based upon your autopsy, your findings, your medical expertise to suggest that the stab wound to the left ventricle of Mrs. Fulford's heart caused that sort of electrical interruption?
No.
You also testified about a significant amount of duct tape that was found around Mrs. Fulford's head and face. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes.
And just briefly, from top to bottom, how far did the duct tape extend?
Well, I didn't measure the top to bottom, but I did talk about what it covers. So it covers the eyes. So it started above the eyes, the nose, the mouth, and the chin. So it went from above her eyes to below her chin.
Did the duct tape completely cover Mrs. Fulford's nose and mouth?
Yes.
What would be the result of duct tape as you found on Mrs. Fulford's body covering her nose and mouth?
Judge, we would object to
I'll overrule the objection to that particular question.
The result would be covering both her external airways, meaning covering the nose and mouth, and ultimately asphyxia.
Based upon your training and expertise as both a physician and a medical examiner, what sort of experience would Ms. Fulford have had with her nose and mouth being covered?
Well,
I'll overrule the objection.
well, just the act of blocking someone's airways, and nose and mouth, it decreases your oxygen, increases your CO2, so you can't get that CO2 out, and so that can cause anxiety and stress to the individual.
Can you give us an example of what sort of experience from everyday life this might be like?
Well,
I'm going to sustain the objection to the form of the question.
Can you give us an example of how someone could produce the same effects as having their nose and mouth covered without actually having it done the way Mrs. Fulford was?
Objection, speculation.
Overruled.
well, I think most people have held their breath at some time, and so it's much that same feeling of trying to hold your breath. The difference is when you're holding your breath, you may pass out from lack of oxygen, but ultimately your breathing centers in your brain take over and you start breathing again. You cannot hold your breath until you die. When you're feeling that holding your breath, if you've done it above water, some people do it underwater, you as you start to run out of oxygen, you may have that kind of anxiety feeling or that feeling of fear or anxiety that you have to breathe again. So it would probably be like that feeling that most of us have experienced.
No further questions.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor, may I have a moment?
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Now, last week you testified that death could be instantaneous if it interrupted the electrical system of the heart, right?
That's correct.
And in this case, there's no way to say whether that happened or not.
The main conduction system that controls the pumping of the heart is an interventricular septum. I didn't see any injury there, so barring any injury there, I can't say for sure.
You can't say one way or the other.
Correct.
Okay. And in this case, you previously talked about the effects of decomposition and that her body was bloated or larger than normal.
Yes.
And so her clothes were tighter,
Yes.
or the zip ties were tighter.
Yes.
And again, there's no way for you to know or prove or disprove that the duct tape was placed over her mouth and nose before or after she was killed.
That's correct.
So you don't know if she experienced the stress and anxiety and lack of oxygen that you described.
That's correct.
And again, you can't say whether she was conscious at the time of this.
No.
You can't say how long she would have been conscious from any of these wounds.
Not with any certainty, no.
Okay. And you can't say how long she would have lived from any particular injury.
Not with an accurate amount of certainty, no.
Okay. May I have one moment, Judge?
Yes.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions.
Redirect?
Doctor, how long would it take a person typically to lose consciousness if their airway is obstructed in the manner that Ms. Fulford's was?
For most of us who aren't professional breath holders, or like those people who do deep sea diving, it'd probably be minutes.
Minutes?
At most, yes.
How many minutes?
You can try holding your breath yourselves. For me, it'd probably be less than 2 minutes. I'm not sure how experienced she was at holding her breath.
And based upon your training, education, and experience in your observations on autopsy, do you have a judgment as to how long it would have taken, setting aside the airway obstructions for the moment, Mrs. Fulford to lose enough blood to lose consciousness?
Again, I would estimate that at minutes,
If 2 or 3, 3 or 4,
probably less than 5.
less than 5?
Yes,
And that would be how long it took her to bleed out, right?
correct.
No further questions.
Doctor, you can step down. Thank you. Mr. Nally, please call the next witness for the state. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Hicks. Call.
The state called Robert Fulford,
Thank you.
and we'll need that instruction read, Your Honor.
Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Members of the jury, you're about to hear evidence about the impact of this murder on the community of Jennifer Fulford. This evidence is being presented to show the victim's uniqueness as an individual and the resultant loss by Jennifer Fulford's death. However, you may not consider this evidence as an aggravating factor. Sir, please state and spell your first and last name for Madam Court Reporter.
Robert Fulford, Robert, Fuld.
Thank you. Ms. Hicks.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
You testified in the first part of this trial, correct? And you were Jennifer's husband?
Yes, that's correct.
And did you prepare something you wanted to read to the jury during this phase?
I did.
You want to go ahead and read that?
Okay, sure. Jennifer Fulford was my wife, my best friend, and quite honestly, amazing. She was the mother of 2 children and also a proud grandmother. According to Jenny, she was going to be on her front porch in a rocking chair with a glass of wine, watching her great children play in the yard when she passed away. She was supposed to be 95 years old. Jenny and I have a long, convoluted story that is well beyond the scope of this statement. We met in 1994 through a mutual friend. We started spending all of our spare time together, and we soon fell in love. Unfortunately, we were at different stages in our lives and had different goals. We had different goals at the time, so we split up in 1998. We remained friends, we remained in love, and kept in contact over the years. In 2005, we found each other again. Our differences had faded away over the years, and we were finally on the same page and still in love. We were married in 2010 and once again became inseparable, or so I thought. Today, we all know how Jenny died, but I'd like to share a little bit about how she lived. First and foremost, Jenny was expressive. When she had a story to tell, she was truly in her element, and Jenny loved telling stories, and it showed. She would throw all of her emotion and energy into the telling. Her voice was so captivating. Other conversations would dwindle as people around her were drawn in. A lot of her stories would probably be classified as the shaggy dog type, but honestly, nobody cared. The telling is what made her stories great. Jenny was amazingly intuitive. She could not hide her feelings, and it was impossible to hide feelings from her. She almost had a sixth sense that she liked to call the Hungarian voodoo. She had a special talent for bringing out the best in others. She had a way of knowing that a smile would improve an angry passerby's day. She would often start up conversations with a stranger that would begin to sound like they were old friends. Jenny was fantastic at every job she had. She seemed to know what people were thinking, perhaps even before they knew themselves. She often seemed to know what people needed, even if they did not. When grocery shopping, it seemed she knew everybody in the store. She took care of 3 households. She would buy what she needed at the store and often add a sub sandwich for somebody outside who looked hungry to her. People truly loved to be around Jenny. She was the glue that held her family together. You never knew what to expect with Jenny, but you knew it would be fun. She always made sure the family was together on every holiday. At parties, she was always entertaining. She could burst into song at a moment's notice or crack a joke that would have everybody rolling with laughter. She had such a beautiful voice. She had an incredibly complex, made-up language that she pretended was Hungarian, and it was really just a bunch of expressive sounds. Surprisingly, their meaning was always understood. There are too many things to list, so I will end with the most important. Jenny was loving. A list of things that Jenny loved could go on for hours. First and foremost, she loved her family. She loved people. She loved the holidays. She loved animals. She loved life. She loved me. I will always love her.
Ms. Simmons? All right, without objection, what's been marked for identification as states HB is admitted into evidence as
It's 195.
states 195? Okay. States Exhibit 195. Once it's oh, do you have it? Okay, go ahead.
has no further questions.
Simmons? Sir, you can step down. Mr. Nolly?
Mayor Pro Tem Clerk,
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, we would offer into evidence what's marked for identification as states H.A. Hotel Alpha. And the next consecutive number, by agreement.
Yes. All right, what's been marked for identification as States HA is admitted into evidence as States Exhibit 196, subject to the court reserving ruling on the matter addressed at the bench. Granted.
For the record, I'm showing page 1 in Fulford. Also, the sentencing minutes reflecting the sentence of imprisonment of 87 months imposed on April 19th, 2012, to be followed by a 5-year period of supervised release following the term of imprisonment.
Mr. Nolly?
State of Florida arrest.
All right, members of the jury, in just a moment, we're going to take a brief recess. During the recess, you're going to continue to leave your notepads and your pens here. During the recess, although the state has rested, you are still under all the court's instructions, including but not limited to the instruction not to discuss this case amongst yourselves or with anyone else. Please follow the deputy in the jury room. We'll bring you back as quickly as we can. Thank you. All right, Ms. Simmons? Ms. Moore?
At this point, I have argument as to sufficiency of the evidence regarding aggravators, if the court wants to address that now. I can go through each one at a time. Is that how the court would like to do it?
Let's see, could counsel approach?
in the Zoom meeting now.
Okay.
The photo.
Yes, they're right here.
Yes, yes.
Hello, can you hear me by any chance? Testing 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me on the other side?
We can hear you. I'm just waiting for the notary to come upstairs.
Oh, okay, no problem.
Okay.
All right, just a heads up. We don't have any picture from your end.
We can see you. I don't.
Is there a notary or something?
Yes, there's a notary present that can swear in Mr. Nelson?
Here. I think
There was no there.
You're breaking up a little bit, so you might need to say that again. I don't know if we've frozen again.
Yes.
Is that rain? Is he talking to that guy again?
Stephany, tell the jurors we'll bring them in as quickly as we can. All right, Ms. Simmons, is the defense ready to bring the jury in?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Nolly?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, if we could please bring in the jury. Ms. Simmons, does the defense acknowledge the jury?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Nolly, the state? All right, members of the jury, I apologize for the delay. We were trying unsuccessfully to resolve some technological issues that would have allowed the video conferencing appearance of a witness. It was partially working, then things weren't working. Bottom line, that's why we kept trying, because we thought we were going to be able to have some success. Unfortunately, we're not successful today. Some more work that needs to be done on that. We're hopeful that all of those issues will be resolved tomorrow morning. So we are going to take our recess in a moment for the day. During the recess, you're going to continue to leave your notepads and your pens on your seats. During the recess, you remain under all the court's instructions, including but not limited to the instruction not to discuss this case amongst yourselves with anyone else, including the instruction not to listen to, read, or in any way have any discussion about news reports, internet, anything at all. Thank you for your service here today. We'll plan to continue the presentation of the evidence at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, so just follow the deputy's instructions. Enjoy your evening. We'll see you tomorrow. Anything else from the state before we go into recess for the day? Anything else from the defense? Mr. Nelson, anything else before we go into recess for the day?
No, sir.
All right, we'll be in recess till 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Y'all have a good evening.